What's going on, Barry? It's the old weeb. And we're talking about one of the greatest video game families of all time. And we're talking about the Sparda family. In the world of Devil May Cry, power is inherited, but pain is always earned. At the heart of its story lies a family whose legacy is forged in rebellion, bloodshed, and loss. Sparda, the demon king who turned against his kind. Dante, the hunter who carries grief within his blade. Vergil, the son who chose power over peace, and Nero, the heir who never knew the weight that his blood carried unto him until it burned through his veins. Let's get into it. Long before any of the Sparda boys, there was Sparda himself, the Dark Knight, a being of immense demonic power who chose the unthinkable. He chose humanity over his demon brethren. In order to stop this era ruled by chaos, Sparda sealed away the demon world, sacrificing his place not only within it, but within Legend's kind, between the realms of hell and earth itself. Not just for the sake of choosing, but for the sake of love, for he fell in love with a human being. And in the time along the way, through what we still can't seem to figure out, he just seemed to have vanished, leaving behind his wife, Eva, with the two sons, Dante and Vergil, but always kind of leaving his presence behind and never truly explaining what he was doing. But of course, he left behind two great gifts, and both the amulets that they carry, along with each other's sword in Rebellion and Yamato. And the thing about the boys, before we get into the weeds of each individual one, because I will go over each one of them, is we have to think about Sparda's thought process and what was he thinking along the lines. Because clearly he is doing this for the sake of what he believes is the betterment of all. But he sacrifices being a father for the sake of being a martyr. And then his sons end up having to pick up the slack throughout the course of the entirety of the games, because their dad is no longer just a legend, he is almost a myth. Like a mythos is grown about him. In fact, in one of the games, there's literally a church founded in his image relating to this. And the fact of the matter is, we still don't understand what's his upbringing. We have almost no history of what Sparda was like as a young demon, and I would love to see a game just based around that alone. But we need to focus on what we do have, and that's the legacy he's created to basically the two most popular video game characters of all time, not only just in Capcom, but in gaming as a whole. And along the lines, we have to think about the fact that when he sealed the demon world compared to the human world, he left behind his power in the demon world. Which means even if we wanted to find him in the human world, do we think he even has the capability to protect his family? Because now he is the number one most hated demon in all of hell, and which leads to literally the death of his wife and the separation of his two kids, in which will lead to the scars that both of them carry into adulthood. And I just want to know what drove this man, because we can't deny what he did was amazing in the span of but thinking of humanity, but he literally sacrificed not only the love of demons and the peace he could have had as the ruler, but he literally almost signed the warrant of death to his wife and the destruction of the childhood of Dante and Vergil. If I had to equate it, it's like the idea of most of us, I would say, know our parents fairly well, and I haven't had the displeasure of not having a parent in my life. But my question to some of those who may have not had their father or not had their mother, would you like to hear about them if they were some kind of like bigger than life legendary figure, but they were never truly involved in any capacity of your life? You would just hear stories. You might have an heirloom or two, but to all intents and purposes, that's a stranger to you. And not only that, your life now becomes completely altered by the choices they made, and therefore you have to live with it. And which kind of drives Vergil to the point where she believes power is everything, because had his dad not given up that power, his mom never would have died. And for Dante, it's a matter of, had he not been born of a man so powerful, he would have had a normal life. And we'll get into both their level of trauma into the next section. But when it comes to Sparda, I just think that he needs to be studied more. We need more information. And I know there's also books, of course. I've read them. I just think that for most people, it would be great to have that truly fleshed out. But let's get on to the boys. Vergil is a tragedy of a child who has lost too much. Too young, his mother was murdered, his brother was lost, his father gone without a trace. And in that void, Vergil turned inward and found the only thing he needed was power. Because with power, he would have prevented all this from happening. The thing about Vergil is that when you really look at him, he is a sad character. No matter how cool he looks when he does his badass things, he exhibits forms of emotional detachment and obsessive compulsion in relation to this pursuit of power. All as a result of the trauma he experienced from watching his mom die and what he thought was his brother dying. And of course, we all know how the story goes from here on out. But you gotta think about, for the better part of almost a decade, this kid was doing all he could to survive. If only thing he had attached to him was the necklace of his mother and parts of, if I remember correctly, Yamato as a sword. He didn't really get a chance to use till he was older, but he still kept to that one piece of his dad that he still had to him. And this lack of, connection with any other person, really any human or demon, led him to really not need anyone because, his dad wasn't there. So therefore, what does he need him for? His mom can't be there anymore. He doesn't need he doesn't need anything. He just needs what he thinks is the one thing that will achieve to his happiness, could be the one thing he didn't have when he needed it the most. And his twisted sense of how to get to where he wanted to be, he looked at to his dad's legacy in a sense of, well, my dad gave that up in order to do what he wanted to do, so what if it's my right to take it back and do what he could not? Because in his mind, the best way to achieve peace is to inherit his father's will and strength, sealed away in the demon world, and become definitely the new king of hell. And this does lead to the events, of course, of Devil May Cry 3, and along the line of what else he was doing, which is explored in other forces of media. The idea is that Vergil is never doing anything in a sense of selflessness. If you think about it, he doesn't go out of his way to harm others. He doesn't even go out of his way to really talk to other people. He is really just a lonely kid wandering the lands with a demonic sword. It is the only thing attaching him to a sense of family. And of course, for the longest time, he didn't know Dante was alive. And what else would you do if all you had left was you? He's basically an orphan. And not basically, he is an orphan. And the fact of the matter is, what else could he do in the world he was in? And don't forget, he's still being hunted by demons because he still carries the necklace, which is the key to unlocking the portal between the human and the demon world. And let's not forget the specialness about his sword. And each of their swords are kind of a reflection of what they need. Yamato, his blade isn't just a weapon, but a symbol of separation for the fact that it cuts between worlds. And with the events of Devil May Cry 5, it can almost cut you internally in pieces of you. And this is kind of a great symbology when it comes to Vergil's character. He is a broken man who is trying to find any semblance of stopping his weakness, to the point that he thinks that cutting out his own humanity would lead to his, happiness has been lost for so long, which is kind of a great thing in relation to how it took him coming full circle with the separation of V, and then Dante kind of guiding V back to him and kind of purifying him along the way, given what he's gone through in the events of DMC 2 along with DMC 1 when he was Neo Angelo and he was literally not himself. Where Vergil turned inward and tried to find kind of the hole missing within him, Dante went outward and became loud, cocky, and flippant. Dante is a man who hides his pain behind cockiness, a smirk, and he just fights. Not for justice, but out of guilt. Because when demons came, he couldn't protect his family. So he made it a business to try to protect the families of others so that a tragedy like his could never transpire again. And if you think about it, Dante's entire time as a demon hunter, all he kind of does is show up, take care of the demons, says, a few one-liners, but doesn't really try to really make relations. He doesn't really try to grow friendships. In fact, his two most trusted companions prior to the events of DMC4, Lady and Trish, if you think about it, both women tried to kill him. It's just like how he does things. And the idea of also the fact that Trish's existence is completely based on the idea of trying to trick Dante by having a demon be made in the image of his mother. Real messed up stuff. But he still, the fact one of the quotes he says is the reason that he kept her alive was because she looks like her mother. And the thing about Dante is that while as cool as he is, and we all love him for his showboaty and his one-liners, and of course his 90s, 2000 punk aesthetic, that's really also a sad man who doesn't want to form friendships and relations because he doesn't want to have that loss again. He doesn't want to experience what it's like to have someone and have that person taken away from them. Like, the deep-seated trauma manifests in this hyper-dependence and emotional repression, which is kind of like led to the whole idea of when he named his store Devil May Cry in relation to Lady's comments about how even a demon could weep for someone that he loved, because in the events of 3, not only does he see Vergil still alive, but the fact is that their first reunion in Lord knows how long, and they literally try to kill each other, just for the sake of, again, his dad. Dante has a disdain for his dad in a semblance of, it's the mess he made, and I have to clean it up. And not only is it the mess that he made, it's a mess that seeps into the lives of others, because there's no telling how many demons actually came over here as a result of his dad. And the fact that he's always, casually dropping one-liners and, casualness when it comes to almost property damage means the point that he just doesn't really want people to take him super seriously because he doesn't want people to come and rely on him. And the thing is that he carries the burden of his dad in a sense of why his sword is named Rebellion. His sword, Rebellion, is a symbol of how he doesn't want to be Sparda's kid. He doesn't want to carry on that legacy in a way that led to all the events transpiring. He's literally trying to reject his dad in the best way scenario. The fact of the matter is that DMC3, he doesn't even want Force Edge. He doesn't want anything to do with his dad, but he will do what he has to protect the rest of humanity from the mess his dad's job and dad's choices led to. I mean, he almost lost his brother again purely because of his dad. Dante chooses to live among humans and to fight for them, to shield them, even when he barely knows how to shield himself. That's the reason why he's always getting stabbed in the chest, no matter what game or story it is. But the fact that his heroism is not born from destiny, but out of survival, that he knows that without someone like him basically on this side of the world, who knows what could happen to other families. And I think the best part about Dante is the sheer kind of, how do I put this? He has a stoicism that leads to a cockiness, that leads to a nonchalant, that you always know that his heart's in the right place. I mean, the scene with him and Lady, when he brings down the fact that it's not just your family matter, it's my family matter too. And I'm sorry that my family issues led to your family being destroyed. Because literally, if not for Sparda's entire existence, there's no reason that Mary's dad would have killed her mom in an attempt to become like Sparda. Once again, Dante feeling the weights and the sins of his dad and how that affects others. I think Dante's arguably one of the coolest characters in Capcom. And there's another character who I might do a deep dive in for a different video if I really felt like going through all my favorite characters in video games. I got a lot to talk about. But in relation to Dante, I think what makes him so lovable is the fact that you know that not only is he funny, but his heart of gold does seep out more than he expects. And he really should kind of lean into it. But then let's get into the surprise member of the family in Devil May Cry 4's main character, Nero. Nero grew up without any knowledge of really who he was. He was raised by the Order of the Sword, who was part of the Church of Sparda in relation of I forget the name of the town. It was basically like Italy, but Devil May Cry version. And he was seen as different, marked by the demonic arm that he could not explain where that came from until everything changes. When, of all things during a sermon, look who shows up to do an assassination attempt. It's very an odd thing when it comes to Nero's character. When you think about it, he is almost a perfect combination of the two boys. Because Nero has Dante's like attitude and cockiness when it comes to what he can and can't do, but he also has a stoicism and like reserved nature when it comes to everybody else. If it's not for Kyrie and her brother, because he's just there. He's just here to do his job and kind of like move along the day, while also having, of course, amazing drip. But when thinking about it, through the adventure he goes on in DMC4, it was an adventure of self-discovery, while he exhibits what we call adaptive resilience, because compared to his uncle and father, him also being an orphan because he didn't know who his parents were, he took the most out of it, and probably because compared to the boys, he had a support system around him. He had the people around him like Kyrie and her brother and the entirety of the community that is the Church of Sparta, while still being kind of ostracized due to the fact that he had the demonic arm that he could not explain. Because it was a Church of Sparta, they definitely embraced him, and I have a sneaking suspicion they definitely knew who he was, as shown in the events of the game, for why they were kind of keeping him around. Another thing about that game is that it kind of shows the internal struggle as he was getting more and more knowledge of his demonic background, and there was this constant kind of pulling at his identities versus his demonic bloodline to his human upbringing. And of course, as a young boy, because he's like 17, 18 at most, kind of the same age as the boys in DMC3, he constantly struggles with anger, an identity, purpose, his lineage, and how he can choose to emphasize. But unlike his father or uncle, he values that connection. He values the human experience. And one could say that's because he's the more human out of all of them. Because compared to Dante and Vergil, he's a quarter human. He's a quarter human. He's a quarter demon. Wrong number. Bad math. And when I look at it that way, is that the Spartan kind of heritage leans into the fact that the more human you become, the stronger you get, which leads into how Sparda was able to rise above all of demonkind for his love in humanity. When faced with the legacy of Sparda, Nero doesn't run from it. He doesn't worship it. He redefines it. And that comes down to what I think is the coolest moments in DMC5, when Nero basically said, I'm tired of all this bad blood spread through the Sparda bloodline, and the fact that Dante and Vergil were eventually going to actually kill each other, because they just cannot seem to get past how do we deal with our dad's shadow. One wanting to run from it, one wanting to embrace it, and both trying to stop the other from basically not accepting who their dad really was. Their dad was, in other words, flawed. Their dad wasn't perfect. Their dad wasn't all-powerful. Their dad, kind of in a way, became human. And Nero, being the most human, of course, he reaches a level of Devil Trigger, able to rival Sin Devil Trigger and stop both of them before they actually did some serious damage, and putting the brakes to his dad, honestly beating his ass. Nero is proof that destiny can be rewritten, that even those born into shadow can shine. Even one who carries the blood of a demon does not have to either embrace or fall victim to their bloodline, because at the end of the day, no matter who you come from, it is your identity that matters the most. Your bloodline is not always the lifeline, and who you are as a being should always shine the brightest, because that's what brings people around you. From a father's silence came 3 sons, one who chose power, one who chose people, and one who decided to make their own path. The blood of Sparda is a curse and a blessing, but more than anything, it is a choice. And these Sparda boys always choose to be the most stylish, badass, and cool people in all of video games with their signature phrases. Let's give it up for the Sparda family, one of the most famous families in all of gaming. This has been the Old Weeb, and hopefully you guys will enjoy my next 2 other families that I tend to talk about in this little mini-series. GG's, guys.
Stop what you're doing!